حبيب الله يا من نوره يملى الوجود والذي من كفه قد فاض فينا بحر جود يا رسول الله يا من نوره يملى الوجود والذي من كفه قد فاض فينا بحر جود أنت سر الله حقا جئت من خير الجدود لنجاة الخلق مما ضرهم تهدي الأنام قالت أقمار الدياجي قل لأرباب الغرام كل من يتبع محمد ينبغي ألا يضام صلى عليك الله وسلم يا رسول الله يا حبيب الله يا نبي.
So we will wait for Shaykh Zain. In the meantime, I'll touch upon his studies again. We'll go into more detail. Shaykh Zain is the son of Allama Aqtab Siddiqi, a great scholar who passed away in the UK, who migrated to the UK, who is the son of the greatest debater known in Pakistan, known as Maulana Muhammad Umar Ijrabi. So now we are honored and blessed to have our esteemed Shaykh arrive, and we are grateful to have him with us. So without further ado, I would like to call Shaykh Zain Aqtab Siddiqi to bless us with his knowledge, intellect, and his wisdom.
الحمد لله وكفى والسلام على عباده الذين اصطفى أما بعد فقد قال الله عز وجل في القرآن المجيد والفرقان الحميد فإن بغت إحداهما على الأخرى فقاتلوا الذي تبغي حتى تفيء إلى أمر الله صدق الله مولانا العظيم. قال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم من يريد الله به خيرا يفقهه في الدين أو كما قال عليه الصلاة والسلام. قال جل جلاله وعم نواله في شأن حبيبه مخبرا مخابرا إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. اللهم صل وسلم على سيدنا محمد المعظم الوجود والكرم وعلى آله وصحبه وبارك وسلم وصل عليه. It is my great pleasure and happiness to be here before you in this historic university and to share a few thoughts with you all. I don't know what kind of lectures you are accustomed to. I can only assume being at university, you are accustomed to very boring lectures because that's what most university lectures are, boring. And I certainly don't want to pay lip service to theory, dogma, or aesthetics. Like a lot of you who are born and bred in this country, there are those who have been given religion as part of their legacy. So most people who practice religion, especially in the UK, practice because it came to them through their parents, and their practice was based on their circumstances, and it was very seldom does one find that one makes a decision to actually follow the religion that you do. And there's nothing wrong with that. But one of the biggest debates in our day and age is the need for religion itself. Those who adopt religion around the globe today, generally, when it comes to this debate, close their eyes. They're not really interested in a debate because the opposite camp demand reason, rationale, and scientific formula to justify certain practices of religion. And because religions are not based on rationale, intellectuality, and in many respects logic, therefore this divide exists whereby people, even if they wanted to question, will not question because that's the way they've been brought up. With that backdrop in mind, we look at this topic today, good and evil. I'm sure none of you have actually come here to be told of the virtues of Moses, Musa, whether in the biblical sense or in the Quranic sense. And likewise, no one needs to know the atrocities of Pharaoh. Some of you may know more, some of you may know less. But generally, everyone knows that Pharaoh was an emblem of evil. Then you have Hussein, and again, you don't need to be told. Hussein was a bastion of good, of goodness, and of all the good things that we aspire to, whilst Yazid wasn't. So, we're not going to go into any character assassination. We're not going to go into a eulogy whereby we praise. We're going to evaluate what this whole saga is actually about. And when one begins the evaluation process, you have to go back to the drawing board and you have to say, what's really going on? You see, no product comes to the market out of coincidence. Any person who said that a product arrived on the shelf came as a result of a coincidence would be a fool. The processes involved in putting that product on the market shelf or on the shelf, if you don't know, all you need to do is ask the manufacturer. And the manufacturer has created an item for your use, but it comes with a caveat. If you want to use this item properly, here's the instruction manual. If you apply your own logic and your own wisdom whilst using the product, then if something goes wrong, tough luck. You can't blame the manufacturer. The manufacturer has extinguished his responsibility in providing you with a manual that talks about the product. Its pitfalls, do's, don'ts. If you follow it, fine, you make use of the product. If you don't, there's no comebacks. Now you see manuals are growing thicker and thicker and thicker. 100 years ago, instruction manuals were very basic. Why? Because laws, regulations now require, put more emphasis on the manufacturer to inform the consumer more and more and more. Do this, don't do this, we are not responsible for this. So if you were to put an Apple iPhone in water and write to Apple and say, "Dear sirs, my phone doesn't work," you will receive a very, not that I work for Apple, you will receive a very prompt email, and I assume email is the way they communicate, starting off, "Dear idiot, who told you to put it in water?" Clearly, no such claim was made in our marketing, and no such claim was made in our instruction. If you, of course, are the owner of Sony, then put it in water all you like, because the manufacturer has said this product is designed to withhold or withstand water. So the manufacturer knows this product. Now just look at this whole setup, the human race, who we are, where we are, what we're doing here. In the grand scheme of things, it would be stupidity to suggest that this is the product of consequence, of coincidence. If an Apple iPhone is not the product of coincidence, then nothing around us, including us, is the product of coincidence. So then what is the purpose of religion? Is religion there designed to complicate your life? Is it there to make your life easier? Most religious people, when they're asked, "Why do you practice?" that's how we're being told what to do. And what's the benefit? Even if there is no benefit that we can tangibly or intellectually refer to, so you have the great pie in the sky when you die. All the rewards of what I do will be the hereafter. And of course those who are critical of religion say, forget about the pie in the sky when you die. Now, let's see and evaluate what religion gives you now. And let's put religion in the dock. And let's see what it really gives you. What does religion give you which modern, civilized, liberal thinking society does not give you? Every one of you needs to ask this question. You have the freedom in a liberal society to practice what you like, how you like. That can't be wrong. Whilst religion says, my way or the highway. Okay, if we don't want to go to the highway, we want to go to your way, what do we actually get in real terms? So then you go to scholars, they will tell you, do this, don't do this, do this, don't do this, do this, don't do this. They've got a whole drop-down list of do's and don'ts. And then when you entrench yourself in those do's and don'ts, you go back to them and you say, now what? So carry on. And it's almost like, and sorry, I'm not in the business of delivering very academic lectures. I try to give practical examples. It's almost like going round in circles. You know, round around the garden, like a teddy bear. That's it. Now what? Carry on. Now what? Carry on. Now what? Carry on. It's a broken record. Where are we using this? Don't know, but just carry on. Will this make me a good person? Yes, it will. There's a slight problem there. You see today, in the world of, or in the house of religion, should I say, whichever religion you take, and I don't discriminate one religion against the other, whichever religion you look at, you see chaos, you see fragmentation, you see barbarism, you see all the ills of society prevalent amongst those who have the label of religion. So religion doesn't guarantee that you will now become civilized, and no amount of excessive knowledge guarantees that you will reach salvation. Otherwise, all the scholars and the academics would be the most sort of ideal citizens and the most revered people. But no, some of the greatest criminals on this earth are people with knowledge. They are people with intellect. The knowledge doesn't deliver, the intellect doesn't necessarily deliver. Then you go to those who practice religion excessively, worship a lot, and for them the key is engage in worship. But that excessive engagement in worship can be dangerous in itself, because it could compromise your ability to execute your legal responsibilities. And most religions in the world, I can speak on behalf of on this point, say that if you neglect your responsibilities, you're actually doing an injustice on religion itself. So, would religion prefer you to sit at home and worship, or would it prefer you to go out and work or study? Of course, it prefers you to go and do it. But what's that got to do with religion? So, the point I'm trying to make is that we really need to go back to the drawing board and ask ourselves, what purpose does religion actually serve? What is there that we can go to someone, not someone, our next door neighbor, and say, listen, pal, you've been married 30 years, well, sorry, you've lived for 30 years with person X, and I've lived with my wife for 30 years. There's no difference between us. The only difference is that at the inception of 30 years, I said 3 magic words. I do, I do, I do. But I'm better than you. My children are better than you. Mine are legitimate, yours are illegitimate. I have a family structure recognized by law, and yours doesn't. So there. He's going to say, it doesn't bother me. This label that you have, how does it make you a better person than me? The fact that my children may be illegitimate, how does it make your children better than mine? These are questions. And simply by having a label doesn't make us better. It doesn't give us the edge over our fellow human being. And religious people have this tendency to put these labels on. And of course, the more labels they have, it's a bit like the army. The more badges they have, the more their seniority. And there's a sense of snugness and a sense of comfort that I'm better than you because I practice and you don't. We're just an ordinary species of the human race, and there you are. And then you have, at the top of the ladder, such people turn into what I call sanctimonious prigs. People who are so full of themselves think that they are right. And as Winston Churchill once said, the sign of an extremist is not one who can't change his mind, it's one who can't change the subject. As far as they're concerned, it's their way, they are the best, and that's it. So what's that got to do with Moses, Pharaoh, Hussein, and Yazid? Evil is the product of religion. Who told us that there is the concept of evil? Religion did. Whichever religion you follow. Evil is a species of religion. And where does evil trace its origin? May I ask this question? Any answers? Where does evil actually come from? What's the source of evil that we recognize as the ultimate icon of evil? Satan. It's poor bugger known as Satan is crucified on a daily basis for being the instigator and originator of evil. But if you look at his biography, and if you look at his background, I can tell you, certainly from the Quran and Sunnah, a bit about him. Satan, I know in biblical terms he was a fallen angel or whatever, but in the Quran and according to Hadith literature, Satan, by virtue of being a jinn, he was a jinn, it's another species, it's another creation. Made of smokeless fire, billions and billions of years old, and this species were the ones to occupy planet Earth before man. Yeah, they were the ones who came before the advent of man. And amongst them there were hierarchies, there were infrastructures, there were institutions, it was a very elaborate setup. But in that world it was survival of the fittest, and it continues to be till this day, the most powerful rules. And amongst them there were good, bad, pious, impious, and amongst the most renowned of the pious amongst the jinns was Satan, who was then known by the name, anyone? Azazil. Azazil was his previous name. And his rank and status was so high, forget about amongst jinns, the most supreme creation at that time were angels. At that time, mark my words, at that time, the most supreme creation were angels. And his rank and honor was of such caliber that he was given status over angels, so that he used to teach angels, guide angels, and angels used to come and sit in his company. And again, just to give you an idea of his rank, he had the keys to hell. I mean, he was the official bouncer for hell. A jinn of such caliber and of such status, who according to some Mufassirin, worshipped God for 70,000 years. Not only did he worship God, he knew God. Me and you, we don't know him. We're being told he's there. This jinn interacted with God. There was no doubt in his mind that there was a God. There was clinical evidence, not only before him, but that clinical evidence was the subject of his interaction. He had a conversation with God, whether you look at the Bible or whether you look at the Quran. He talked to God. He interacted with God. So someone who knows for sure that there is a God, has so much knowledge that angels come to his door, worships for 70,000 years, what went wrong? You have to ask yourself that question. He wasn't born evil, and before him there was evil. It's not that he was the instigator of evil. The Quran says, Aba wastakbara wa kana min al-kafirin. He was obedient, and he was disobedient, and he was proud, and he became from amongst the kafirs, the non-believers. Suddenly there were non-believers there before. So the question is, what went wrong? There was no shortage, ladies and gentlemen, of degrees, of knowledge. There was no shortage of worship. He knew all the arts of worship. And me and you worship in oblivion, we don't know. But he knew for sure. He had clinical evidence in front of him of the Creator, of the Lord, and then he talked to the Lord. The question is, what went wrong? Why would a person of such caliber default? I mean, was he mad to stand in the presence of God and be proud, not knowing the consequences of that? What went wrong? It's easy to say, oh yes, well, he was proud. But no one, wakes up in the morning and says, I want to murder X. I want to murder Y. I want to do wrong. People wake up with good intentions. People wake up and people who want to do good. Why would this species actually take the bold step of, and look at the conversation that she had with God. Allah says, قال يا إبليس, oh Iblis, ما منعك أن تسجد لما خلقت بيدي? What's your problem? Why are you not prostrate towards? Because that's all I want you to do. Man, Adam, just prostrate towards him. Give him respect. What's your problem? I created him with my hands. Of course, not with my hands as in my hands and your hands. With the hand of God. بقدرتي. Oh, كما شاء. What's your problem? I created him. Forget him. Look at the fact that I created him. I'm telling you. You've worshipped me for 70,000 years. You know me. You talk of me day and night. You teach about me. What's your problem? And look at his answer. قال أنا خير منه. I'm better than him. And if you evaluate this statement clinically, that I am better than him, he was actually wrong. I don't know whether you know this or not, but if you don't, well, here's news for you. In the Quran and Sunnah, the most powerful species in this entire universe are not jinns, are not angels. The most powerful species are human beings. And the best species in this entire universe, better than angels, better than jinns, and this is not me speaking, of course I would say humans are better because I'm a human. But the manufacturer says, لَقَدْ خَلَقْنَا الْإِنسَانَ فِي أَحْسَنِ تَقْوِيمٍ. We made the human species the best of species. The manufacturer knows his product. He knows what one product is capable of. And he says very clearly, لَقَدْ خَلَقْنَا الْإِنسَانَ فِي أَحْسَنِ تَقْوِيمٍ. So Iblis was technically wrong. When he said, أَنَا خَيْرٌ مِنْهُ, God should have just said to him, shut up, you don't know what you're talking about. I'm going to create him. I'm telling you prostrate. What's your problem? Who knows more, me or you? No. God didn't even challenge his premise. Why? Because his argument wasn't entrenched in intellectuality, in rationale. It was entrenched in pride. The question is, what went wrong? What safeguard do every one of you have sitting here, religion or no religion, have that you will not end up like him? I get questions asked to me, well, these people who go and join ISIS, what's their problem? Are they indoctrinated? Are they overwhelmed? I mean, does someone give them an injection to tranquilize them and to make them think? Perfectly normal thinking human beings. What leads them to do what they do, commit these acts of, I would say acts of animalism or barbarism, but if an animal had a tongue to speak to me, I'm sure an animal would say, hey, go out. Even we don't do the kind of stuff these guys do. And I'm sure if I met one of the medieval barbarians, even they would have beef with me to say, hang about, whatever we were, we didn't kill our own. And these guys, I mean, in the name of religion, they do what they do. It's mind-boggling. But what causes a young mind who studies at a British university to say, yes, I'm going to go and join this group? What safeguard do you have in your mind? Oh, no, I come from a very good family, I come from a very well-off family, I come from a very religious family, I come from a very intellectual family. Look at their biodata. They're not, dodos who come from, socially deprived backgrounds. There's people there who join their ranks who are intellectuals, who are convicted people. They know what they believe. They can have an argument with you. It may not be a two-way argument, but it will be an argument nevertheless. What safeguard do you have in place that you won't be there? Or forget them, forget ISIS. ISIS it's a recent product. What guarantee do you have that you will not be on that side? Now, coming to my subject, having explained this backdrop in a lot of detail, let's look at Pharaoh and Yazid. Pharaoh and Yazid. Let's look at similarities between them. Let's look at similarities between Moses and Sayyidina Hussein. Pharaoh was a hereditary ruler. For him, the right to rule existed upon birth. And that was the same psychology of Yazid. As far as Yazid was concerned, my father is ruler and I will succeed him. Whether I'm worthy of it or not, and whether you like it or not, tough luck, I will succeed. So this concept of succession and rule by a birthright was a hallmark of both of these species. They both believed it was their inherent right to rule. It's not because you choose that they should rule. They grew up with this complex that we are rulers, and they were treated like rulers, and they behaved like rulers. And here's another key similarity. They ruled in the name of religion. Religion is their premise after I am divinely appointed. Well, in the case of Pharaoh, it was I am God, and in the case of Yazid, it was I am a representative of God, which in practical terms amounts to the same thing. You don't listen to me, you are in trouble. Why? Because I am the ultimate icon of religion. And they conducted themselves as if they were either with Pharaoh, as if he was God, and Yazid actually, his demeanor in court was that I have been divinely selected. No one can come to this seat without being divinely selected. I am divinely selected. I look at your faces and you're all sat as though you sat in a crown court waiting for trial on a murder charge. I mean, you can't smile. And if you don't want to smile, then I'll give you something to smile about. If you remember, there was a program on TV called Jeremy Beadle. You've Been Framed. Anyone remember that program? Yes? Right then. One of the programs in Jeremy Beadle was where, and this is, for me, it was like, whoa, state of the art. He set someone up whereby he got a group of people and he said, right, the wife has told us that this guy is X, Y, and Z, so I'm going to set him up. So what they did was that they wrote a book which talked about the coming of a Messiah, the coming of the prophesied coming of a Messiah. And they drew in pencil his picture, and all his attributes were recorded in this book. And, the wife was in on it, and they thought, let's have a laugh at his expense. Then they said to the wife, to convince him that he is the Messiah, tell us something about him that no one else knows. She said, very simple, he's got a mole, a very thick mole on his bum. And so therefore they wrote in the scriptures, and the Messiah shall have a mole on his bum. So, this guy walking down the high street, and suddenly a guy comes up to him and says, Sire, this is you are the chosen one. He says, shut up, not me, you got the wrong person. He says, no, Sire, it is you are the one. And he says, look, seriously, you got the wrong guy. He says, no, please, I beg of you, at least come to our temple. They created a proper temple. And when he walked into the temple, there was a huge picture of him, not photographed, but just a handpainted. This is the Messiah. Now at this point, this guy actually thought, you know what, this is a sheer coincidence, probably some twin of mine or something. So, this guy who looks similar, he says, you've got the wrong guy, I'm just a normal, normal person off the street. He said, no, let's talk about yourself. And as he talked, they said, yes, this is written in the book, yes, this is written in the book, yes, this is written. And it was all there, and he showed, they showed, because they knew from his wife what his habits were. In the end, he said, look, this is all a coincidence, they can't happen. They said, there's one thing. And the scripture says, one thing that cannot be denied is that this guy will have a mole on his backside. So he said, oh my God, this is too good to be. They looked and they found the mole, that you are the Messiah. Now this guy, up till then, didn't believe that he was a Messiah. But the moment everything stacked up, he actually started believing that he was a Messiah. So then he would sit on his throne, they'd prepare the throne for him, and people would come up to him, someone would come up to him, I am blind, I cannot see, Master, touch me. And he would touch the person, and he would say, I can see. And this guy would say, okay, power to all. Now, what that program showed was an ordinary guy who started out from being Joe Bloggs actually believed himself to be one with celestial affinity, one with godliness in him. He actually believed himself to be of such caliber. Until, of course, Jeremy Beadle came to him and said, many minutes later, you've been framed. And you should have seen his face. But that's not the point. The point is, you see, that's the problem here. Pharaoh grew up thinking, I am the emblem of Godship, Godness. I am God. He grew up with this chip on his shoulder. Yazid also grew up with this chip on his shoulder. I am the son of the ruler. I have the God-given right to rule. Whether someone likes me or not, I am divinely ordained to rule. So that's another similarity between them. They practice in the name of religion, and although with Pharaoh, he practiced what Moses described as proscribed religion with an O, whilst Yazid practiced a prescribed religion. So there you had someone who had his own religion, and here you've got someone who followed a religion. The key thing to note here is religion. You know, if these were mindless barbarians, you could say, well, what do you expect? They had no adherence to religion. But we're dealing with religious guys. Ladies and gentlemen, if you haven't noticed, we are dealing with people who call themselves religious, call themselves appointed by divine appointment. And then look at them. Both were tyrants, both were absolute rulers, no accountability, both were obsessed with power. But let's look at them, let's strip all their titles away from them. Forget who's Pharaoh. Forget who Yazid was. Let's just look at them as ordinary Joe Bloggs. If Pharaoh was sitting next to him, Yazid was sitting next to him, strip him off his titles, strip him off their titles, say, let's look at them as human beings. You know, down to the chassis. Let's look at them as human beings. If you look at them as human beings, the kind of characteristics you will find in them are characteristics of paranoia, serious psychological issues. They're both vain people. They suffer from this thing of vanity. They're both inherently proud people. And the list can go on and on and on. If you look at them as humans, in their chassis, there's serious wrongs in them. And now you put the labels on them, well, of course they're going to do what they did. You don't expect them to implement regimes of fairness and of equality and of normality. It is a natural, probable consequence. The milk will reflect the malai, the queen. Yeah, if the milk is contaminated, the cream is going to be contaminated. So if you strip them down to their chassis, you will see as people they were, you know, you couldn't go for a coffee with Yazid. He had serious personality issues. He couldn't socialize. You couldn't go and play a game of badminton, it was not that they had badminton in that day, with Pharaoh. Look at them in their bare human form. They were unsocial. They had serious psychological issues. And then, I'm coming on to the other two. Then if you look at them, they couldn't tolerate adversarial thinking. Listen, if you don't agree with me, I'm not going to let you live. Either you agree with me and you live, or if you don't agree with me, that's it. No opposition. That's why it didn't occur to Pharaoh that, okay, look, let Moses take his people and let him go to the promised land and let him live in the promised land. Look, I'm still going to be a ruler, but no, he had to pursue him. Why? Because he was paranoid. He thought, if this guy lives, it is a serious threat to my stability. It It wasn't just about, well, he took my subjects away from me. Pharaoh already had lots of subjects. I mean, it wasn't that, Moses said to him, right, you're no longer king, or you're no longer the ruler, I'm the new ruler. No, he just took a certain group of people and took them to the promised land. But Pharaoh couldn't tolerate that. As far as he was concerned, if you're not with me, you're against me. Does that ring a bell? That statement. If you're not with me, if you're not with us, you're against us. Where have you heard that?
Some imbecile from America.
Sorry?
Some imbecile from America.
Yeah. So you see, the thing is, you've got to look at them, from a globe, bird's eye point of view. If you're not viewers, if you're not with me, you're against me. Yazid's exactly the same problem. If you're not with me, you're against me. He couldn't tolerate the fact that one man said no to him. It got to his head. I mean, the guy could have actually thought that, hang about, I've got millions of people here who are with me. They've paid homage to me. They have bowed before me. They have accepted me. This one Hussein, he hasn't. So what? No. I cannot tolerate that. Lack of tolerance for opposition. These are similar traits between them. And it wasn't the case that Musa ﷺ was going there to bring an army to attack Pharaoh. It wasn't a case of him creating a political alternative to Pharaoh. Likewise, Imam Hussein wasn't interested in setting up a separate infrastructure there. No. He wasn't interested in power. He wasn't interested in the obsessive sort of quest for power like Yazid. For him, it was no big deal. So these are similarities. And then finally, in this respect, if you look at Pharaoh and Yazid, one of the things that they did very well is that they breached natural law. Ladies and gentlemen, there are certain laws that exist above religion. They have got nothing to do with religion. As you know, both in the Bible and in the Quran and Sunnah, there is something which is above religion. There are many things that are above religion. And those things are justice, natural law, and the list goes on. There are some things, and every religion says, yeah, listen, we will not touch that. Justice will be dispensed irrespective of race, gender, nationality, religion. Justice is justice. And there are so many examples of this, both in the time of the Prophet ﷺ and thereafter, where there was total disregard to the identity of the claimant or the defendant. It was, we will dispense justice. Remember the case where the Jew brought his case before Sayyidina Umar, and the claimant was Sayyidina Ali. Sayyidina Ali made a claim, when the case was heard, on a balance of probabilities, the evidential burden was not extinguished. And Sayyidina Umar said, I'm sorry, I cannot give judgment in your favor. And yet you're dealing with a Jewish person here, you're dealing with not only a Muslim, but one of the most iconic Muslims there were around, then and today. And yet judgment is given against him. And this guy was so impressed that, look, my religion was immaterial. What was material was the dispensing of justice. And there are many, many examples of this. Justice is blind, justice needs evidence, and justice rises above religion. Whoever you are subject to the rules of natural law, natural justice, and justice itself. But these people were, if they were alive today, if Yazid and Pharaoh were alive today, I don't have any doubts in my mind that they would be prosecuted in the international criminal courts for war crimes. There is no doubt in my mind that they would be criminals and subject to prosecution. Because for them, no amount of torture, no amount of persecution was enough. Their cause was greater. And humanity and human values and natural law, human rights were totally irrelevant. Irrelevant. There was no framework of basic human rights, basic laws. They just did not exist. Yet, okay, Pharaoh made his own law because he came as a symbol of being God himself. But Yazid himself, he had enough precedents before him to show that whoever you are, whatever you are, there are certain rights of humans which are over and above religion. The rights of prisoners of war. After the Battle of Badr, the Prophet ﷺ did not order the prisoners of war to be slaughtered, to be mutilated, to be burned. He did not, and forget about the ones who were alive, even the dead ones. I mean, in the battle of, I believe it was Khandaq, the battle of the trenches, one of the greatest warriors on behalf of the Meccans was slaughtered at the hands of Ali. And Ali, one strike, and this guy was renowned in his time for being an absolute giant. And Ali went up to him. It wasn't a contest, saying that one strike of the Zulfikar and struck him and finished him on the spot. The Meccans were seriously demoralized because of his death. In the end, they came up to him and they said, they sent an envoy and they said, "Oh Muhammad, we'll give you 10,000 dirhams. Give us the dead body of our warrior." 10,000 in those days. 10,000 dirhams like today is like almost like 100,000 pounds. Here's 100,000 pounds for a dead body. The Prophet ﷺ said, 10,000 dirhams? You want to give me money, 10,000 dirhams, to give you the body of someone who left his house to kill me? You want to give me money for him? Take your money away. I don't want your money. Here is your money. Take it. No charge. I would turn down money. I mean, today, in this day and age, when it comes to bribery and money, people think, so what? We'll do tawbah later. Just give us the money. Just want it later. We'll do tawbah later. Forget it. Prophet ﷺ said, I don't want this money. Muhammad does not trade in dead bodies. There's a certain grace, there's a certain framework of morality in place. But if you look at Yazid and the persecution of Yazid, there was no framework of morality there. If you look at Pharaoh and the framework of his persecution, there was no framework which he would adhere to, which they would adhere to. It was no amount of force is unjustified, no amount of cruelty is unjustified for the preservation of the kingdom. They were both kings, Pharaoh and Yazid in their own right. They were both kings. So they were serious criminals from an international criminal law perspective. And you see, in this respect, if you look at Yazid a bit more, you'll see that Pharaoh, finally, I invent the law, I make the law, I am the law. But Yazid, he was a representative of those values. And if Yazid was a dodo who couldn't think for himself, and he was an intelligent person himself. He had at his disposal great scholars, and yet he implemented what he implemented not only in Karbala. Karbala was just a symbol of his wrath. But if you look at without giving too much example, because we're not here to quote facts and figures, we're just looking at the analysis. If you look at Yazid's general mindset, it was like, and yet he had knowledge, people of knowledge with him. And that bugs me, because I think to myself, well, if Yazid was an idiot, he couldn't think, what about those people around him? Were they all idiots? Were they all mindless barbarians? No, they were thinking people, and for goodness sake, they were people who on whose tongues day and night there was Qala Allah, Qala Rasul. So just by calling yourself Muslims, or by calling yourself adherents to a religion, or by professing religious knowledge, doesn't exempt you from being lured into the methodology of Yazid and of Pharaoh. And I come back to my first question. What safeguards do you have in place? That yes, I will not join ISIS because I fear being arrested. I will not join ISIS because I fear the wrath of MI5. No, that's not the reason. Why? What safeguards do you have in place that you will yourself not become a Pharaoh or a Yazid? Because they were kings in their own domains. Every one of you is a king in your own domain. You have power, authority at a micro level, at a macro level. And if you don't have it over anyone else, you have it over yourself. You are kings of yourself. And the Prophet ﷺ said, كُلُّكُمْ رَاعٍ وَكُلُّكُمْ مَسْئُولٌ عَنْ رَعِيَّتِهِ. You are all shepherds and you'll be asked about your flocks. We're all kings, men, women, whichever religion, whichever walk of life we belong to. But what safeguards are in place to make sure that we don't inherit the legacies of Pharaoh and Yazid? Yeah, it's all very well having a party and saying we hate Pharaoh and we hate Yazid. But these guys weren't born evil. Shaitan was not born evil. What led him towards evil? Before I answer that question, let's just look at Musa al-Islam and Imam Hussein. Let's look at similarities between them. They both had religion, the way these guys had religion. They were both tainted with religiousness. They had a similar outlook in life. They had loyalty and accountability to a divine being who they, although they could relate to in their own ways over and above that which the masses could relate to, but they didn't use that relationship to say, I am better than you. It was, so what? I mean, if you look at prophets and biographies of prophets generally, no prophet was born and said, good morning, I'm a prophet. No. They lived, except for Isa al-Islam, and even then, Jesus, even then, he didn't announce himself to be a prophet. At the time when he was in his cot, some people, they doubted the credibility of his mother, and his mother at that juncture said, فَأَشْعَرَتْ إِلَيْهِ. She pointed to the baby. قَالُوا كَيْفَ نُكَلِّمُ مَنْ كَانَ فِي الْمَهْدِ صَبِيًّا. How can a child talk? Then he said, قَالَ إِنِّي عَبْدُ اللَّهِ. A child at that tender age speaks. آتَانِيَ الْكِتَابِ. I have been given a book. Not I will be given a book. آتَى يُعْطِي. I have been given a book. Man, you're just born. No. آتَانِيَ الْكِتَابِ وَجَعَلَنِي نَبِيًّا. And I have been made a prophet. That shut them all up. They knew that this isn't just, a case where they can apply their intellect. Yeah, all safe, carry on. But even then, Jesus didn't say, go around street after street. I'm telling you, I'm a prophet. Or Moses didn't start his life by saying, listen, you better behave yourself in front of me, I'm a prophet. The Prophet ﷺ, 40 years of his life he spent without the label of prophet, yet he was a prophet. Prophets are not, they don't graduate as prophets. There's no university that you go to become a prophet. You either are a prophet or you're not. But why was it that they announced prophethood later, and for a great portion of their life, they ascribed themselves as ordinary human beings? Why? Because they wanted to show people that, look, we don't need labels. We don't need to be, we are. We're normal, we're like you. We live amongst you. We live like you. Judge us on the same criteria that you judge your own. Judge us on that human level. That's why when the Prophet ﷺ announced his prophethood, he didn't say, believe me that I am a prophet. He says, listen, what do you think about my credibility? Do you think I'm a credible person? He said, of course you're a credible person. 40 years of your life, we've never seen you lie. You're the most trustworthy person. You're a mediator. You're a just person. I said, well, if you accept me on that sort of platform of credibility as a human, then on the same credibility I'm telling you as a prophet. Then actually what happened happened. But the point is, they didn't use religion to distinguish themselves from the other. For them, it was, so what if we are who we are? But we are here to show you, and we're not here just for a book. Moses came with a book, Sayyidina Hussein came for a book. The point is, they both had books. But they didn't say, here we are. Or Sayyidina Imam Hussein didn't say, you know what, bugger is he? We're just going to have a nice little institute and I'm going to have nice lectures. I'm going to talk about religion. We're going to have nice courses on religion. If you allow me, those of you who don't understand, I'll translate. Hazrat Sultan Bahul he says, Jekar deen ilm vich hunda, te sir ne zed kyun charde ho? He said, if deen was just about knowledge, the dissemination of knowledge, academia, then why would the spear hold the head of Imam Hussein? What? Did he not realize that there's such something called diplomacy? Could he not have just said, here you are, I'll do bay'ah? That's what he wanted. A 2-minute job, I'll do bay'ah on the hands with you. And then later on he could have gone, next door neighbor, next door, he could have used all the French in the world and said, ah, bugger, and what I did was it meant nothing, end of. As long as he's happy, I can carry on with my work. Let me just carry on with the good work that I'm doing. Let's engage in spirituality. Let's engage in knowledge. No. He stood up to the tyrant and said, what are you? You don't stand to that threshold, I will not acknowledge you. Right then. So, for them, religion wasn't just a gimmick, it wasn't just a label. It was a way of life. Their morning, their afternoon, evening, and their sleep were all manifestations of their belief. And the last thing between the two, I can do a much longer list, but just shortly. Pharaoh relied on the power. He didn't have any personal power, by the way. Personally, he was just an ordinary Joe Blogs. But he relied on the power of people who practice black magic. But he, on the strength of that, because those people who practice black magic were his subjects, on the strength of that, he was able to show himself up there. Moses, on the other hand, had power. Can I just clarify this point of power? There are four kinds of power in the Quran and Sunnah. One is what we call magic, istidraj in Arabic, magic, illusion. Here you are, this is X. You think you're looking at X, but actually you're looking at Y. That's magic. That's also a power. Naturally, it's trickery, it's treachery, it's deception, but who cares? It's entertainment. That's one power. Then you have another form of power, which is called the power of jinns. Jinns are a species, there's no big deal about them. They're just like lions, other animals, they're just another species. They interact with us in a way, they coexist with us, they're a noble species their ages are longer, but they exist. And a lot of people in the marketplace make use of their power. And when they make use of their power in an illegitimate manner, that illegitimate use of power is called black magic. Even though I'm actually trying to work out why the word black is used. Yeah. I'm sure it's something racist. Why black? I mean, this woman came up to me and said, I think I suffer from black magic. I said, why not pink? She said, what's wrong with black? I said, what's wrong with pink? I said, so why black? I'm still trying to work that one out, if anyone can help me, by the way. But using jinns for an illegitimate purpose is called sihr in Arabic, black magic in common language. So that's the second source of power. The third source of power in the Quran and Sunnah is where you invoke through dua certain angels who come and serve. For example, the most common example I can give you, Ayatul Kursi. Ayatul Kursi has certain virtues, and if you read it, it invokes this dua, as a dua, it invokes certain angels who come and protect you. And I don't need to go into detail, there's Sahih hadith on this, where Ayatul Kursi has many benefits of protection. And who protects? Angels. Yeah. So these are three forms of power, but there's another form of power in the Quran and Sunnah. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is called human power. The power of the human. But me and you, we underestimate who we are. Simply because we actually don't know who we are. We think that we are species that were created at our date of birth and will die at our date of death. But if you look at the manufacturer, and if you look at how the manufacturer has talked about us, a bigger picture of ourselves will emerge. That we are not only one of the oldest species, but we are also the most powerful species. So the question that begs to be asked is, well, if we're powerful, what's in us that's powerful? I mean, if you look at our physical faculties, I mean, look at our hearing and compare it to the hearing of a whale. A whale can hear, as I was up to 17 kilometers in the ocean. We go in the water, we can't hear more than 5 meters, if we're lucky. Whales are better hearing than us. The golden eagle, look at its eyes, look at our eyes, the falcon. And you will find every faculty that a human being has in the animal kingdom is 10 times better. So what's in us that makes our manufacturer says that we are better, we are the best of creation? You see, science and the quest of science revolves around that which is observable. But the problem is, the calculator has its limit, and the mind has its limit. But the cosmos and the data of the cosmos cannot be encapsulated by the human mind, simply because it is limited. But that's where this beautiful thing comes into the equation called technology. If I said that I'm going to deliver a 1.5-hour lecture next week on the Nokia 3210, how many people would actually attend the lecture? None. And if they did, I would have serious concerns with their frame of mind. However, if I said next week I'm going to deliver a comprehensive, authentic lecture on the iPhone 7, I'll get an audience. So why am I not getting an audience with 3210? And why am I getting an audience with 7? The audience knows the technology of 7 is going to be something to look forward to. That's old technology. Let's not talk about old technology. But ladies and gentlemen, if you look at the Quran and Sunnah, you will see that the technology that is invested by our manufacturer in the human being is so advanced, that when one looks at it with modern technology and compares it, one says, joke. You know, there's no comparison. Let me give you one example. We say the first man in space was? Right, and that's what we're all trying to believe. But if you look at your scriptures, whichever scripture you follow, or if you look at the Quran and the Sunnah, that is incorrect. Because my father, your father, the father of the human race, wasn't born on this earth. Wasn't born on this earth. Forget where he was born. His first address, his first coordinates weren't on this earth. He actually lived in a place called, oh come on, that's not a difficult question. Where did he live? Jannah, paradise. Right there. So when Allah said to him, "Ihbitu minha," now go from here, he didn't say, slight technical problem. You want me to travel in space? Costume, please? Oxygen problem? And how am I going to get in? Ozone layer? No. From Jannah, he came down. And someone may say, well, that was because he was a prophet and he had powers. Fine. What about his wife? The first man in space, ladies and gentlemen, according to our scriptures, just said, no, I don't understand. So space technology and space travel is something that's quite old as far as technology is concerned in the Quran and Sunnah. But that's just one example. There are many, many, even today, we have phenomena that science can't explain. I mean, have you come across that monk? And this is not a gimmick, by the way. And he's not even, he's a Buddhist monk, Ramjan, I believe his name is. He sits under a tree for 7 months, no food, no water, no talk, no movement. But he's there, alive. His hair are growing, his nails are growing. Science is baffled. Discovery Channel puts a camera. And you can't bribe Discovery Channel. There's many channels that you can do. Yeah. But not Discovery Channel. Yeah. 24, 48, 72 hours. The camera is in front of him. The guy doesn't move. He doesn't eat. He doesn't talk. He doesn't. But he's alive. 9 months later, he gets up, goes. And that's it. And now you go up to a scientist and say, no, can you explain this? No, I can't, but I will find out one day. I'm sure there's a portable explanation. I'm sure there's a real explanation to this. You know what? Think. This power that is being shown, this isn't a gimmick. This is an inherent power of the human species. But when you look at the Quran and Sunnah, I mean, Ramjan's there, I mean, please Google it, don't take my word for it. This isn't in some scripture, by the way, or Buddhist manual. You can Google it, you can see him. Yeah, his nails are growing, his hair are growing. And then you look at it and try and say, wow, what technology, I mean, what? He's mastered the art of understanding himself, that he can preserve himself within the elements, without the elements. But when you look in the Quran and Sunnah, this is very little technology. Because in the Quran and Sunnah, you see an example of the Ashab al-Kahf. They sleep for 300 years. They're not prophets. They sleep for 300 years. And after 300 years, they wake up. And one says to the other, "Kam labithtum?" How long did you sleep? And the other replies, he didn't say 300 years. He says, "Labithna yawman or ba'da yawm." Maybe a day or a part of a day. The nails hadn't grown, the hair hadn't grown. There, it was the ability to sustain the human body from the elements, within the elements. But the amazing thing was that time and the impact of time had no impact on their bodies. That's why, I mean, you sleep 12 hours or 13 hours and you know you've slept because your body feels tired. These guys, 300 years, and then when they wake up, they say, oh, a day or so. So the point is, that technology was all technology. And coming back to power, Musa had access to phenomenal power. So why didn't he actually just, likewise, Sayyidina Hussein, he had access to phenomenal power. I mean, for goodness sake, he's a custodian of the teachings of his grandfather, his father. No, giants in the world of the Quran and Sunnah. He inherits so much knowledge. I mean, let me just give you one example. An ummati of Solomon has so much power that he can travel from one place, from Jerusalem to Yemen and back before the blinking of an eye, and not only do that journey, but he can actually bring the throne of Sheba, Bilqis, back to Sulaiman alayhi salam. قال الذي عنده علم من الكتاب. He had a bit of knowledge from the book. That was his power. It wasn't that he had, had some witchcraft or some hocus pocus going on. No, the Quran said عنده علم من الكتاب. He had some knowledge. Min is tabriz, he had some knowledge. Not a lot of knowledge, some knowledge from the book. Which book? The Palms of David, his father's holy book, Dawood al-Islam. He had some knowledge of the book, and this was the power of Sulaiman al-Islam's companion, that he had some knowledge, and by virtue of that knowledge, he was able to not only undergo that journey, but in that journey he was able to shift a huge mass from one destination to another. That was the power of Asif bin Barqiya, a companion of Sulaiman al-Islam. If that's the knowledge of Aqtab bin Siddiqi, can you imagine the knowledge of Sayyidina Hussein, who, who was, one of those who inherited knowledge from his brother, from his father, from his grandfather. He's in a league of his own. But the question arises that if they had the power, these four powers that I mentioned, they didn't use the power of trickery and magic, they didn't use the power of jinns, they didn't need to access angels, so why didn't they use their powers? Musa should have said, you know what, if I can create a snake from my staff, forget anything else, the first person I'm going to get is you. You're my hit list. Pharaoh, watch out. No, he said carry on. Let it, no problem. Sayyidina Hussein, why couldn't he use his, spiritual powers? Why not? After all, he was being subjected, persecuted. In self-defense, people use powers, but no. I can't use my power. And of course, the powers that Moses used weren't against Pharaoh. In fact, those powers were either to flee him, or flee from him with his nation, or they were to show his own people that look, or when he was challenged, he responded, but he didn't go around saying, you got to listen to me because I'm a prophet and here's my power. No, it wasn't a case of that. It was a case of, listen to me because I've lived life amongst you as a normal human being. Talk to me. Let's engage with my message, not on the basis of closing your eyes, on the basis of opening your eyes. What are the objectives that this religion is actually leading you towards? So none of them use their spiritual power. Otherwise they could have just said, forget Imam Hussein, the Prophet ﷺ. If you look at the literature of the Quran and Sunnah, Hajuj and Majuj were alive. From the Quran talks about them at the time of Zulkarnain. Dajjal was alive, the hadith of Tamim 9. The Prophet ﷺ said, forget these Meccans. I'm just going to go and kill Dajjal. The Antichrist, because the Antichrist was around at that time. The Prophet ﷺ sat on his pulpit and hit his pulpit and said, oh people, Dajjal is in the east, he's in the east. Why couldn't he just go and just kill him off? Finished. Why all of these lowlives here in Mecca who were hell-bent on persecution? He should have got rid of the real icon of evil. No, he didn't. They didn't use their spiritual powers. They used their normal human capabilities. Here, Moses said, enough of the persecution, we are going. Hussein said, I cannot accept your regime, and so therefore I will migrate. And Yazid did what he did. So, now to wrap things up, I don't like any questions, but to wrap things up, what made Yazid who he was? What made Pharaoh who he was? Yes, it's all easy to say, well, they were obsessed with power, they wanted to keep power. But there's many people who do that, who exercise power, but yet they're good people. History has given many examples of such people. What led to their contamination? What led to their degeneration? And then above them, Iblis, Shaitan, what led to his degeneration? Ladies and gentlemen, when one starts thinking on those grounds, one starts thinking about the manufacture and the product. Who we are. Yazid was an ordinary human being. Pharaoh, whatever he rated himself to be, he was an ordinary human being. Iblis was a jinn. None of them were born evil, but they manifested evil. The common denominator between them wasn't that they practiced evil in the name of evil, or were advocates of evil, or bastions of an evil regime. As far as they were concerned, they were icons of goodness. They were representatives of legitimacy. They were representatives of authority, of legitimate authority. So what was it that was the common denominator between Yazid, Pharaoh, Shaitan. When you look at that common denominator, bring it back to yourselves and say, I'm in charge of 3 people in my office, or I'm in charge of my family, or I'm in charge of my class. In our lives, we will all be exposed to a seat of power, whether in the house, whether in the office, whether in university, whether in our social circle. We will all come to exercise power. What safeguard do we have that we will not practice the methodology of Fir'aun, of pharaohs? We will not practice the methodology of Yazid. What safeguards do we have in place? If you come back to the manufacturer and ask the manufacturer, we don't know, how can we avoid that methodology? How can we adhere to this methodology? These people were people of religion. These people were people of religion. Today you have people of religion who massacre and who commit utmost atrocities in the name of religion. So how do we know that we are in the safe zone? Not because we're told by society that we are safe. That benchmark is a very dangerous benchmark. That society deems something to be safe. Well, society deemed that Hitler, his rise to power was just, even though he came through a democratic process. Society and the majority view in society is not necessarily the benchmark of the probative value of a certain concept. Because history tells, the majority of people decided that communism was right, but then history told us a different story. So just because a large group of people say that this is right doesn't mean to say it's right. How do you know? The minority could be right. But you have to look at things from a bird's eye point of view. And that is this burning question. What is this all about? How am I safe? Go back to the manufacturer. And with this question, what is the real purpose of me putting my head on the floor? Is it really about getting paradise? Come off it, for goodness sake. The Prophet ﷺ with his finger pointed towards certain individuals in Masjid al-Nabawi. Abu Bakr fil Jannah, Umar fil Jannah, Osman fil Jannah. And these lips were lips which were speculative. وَمَا يَنْطِقُ عَنِ الْهَوَىٰ إِنْ هُوَ إِلَّا وَحْيٌ يُوحَىٰ. When he said, he knew what he was saying, he wasn't speculating. When he said, Abu Bakr, Jannah is for you, he wasn't speculating, for sure. So why did Abu Bakr Siddiqi pack his bag, say, no, I'm going to pack the bag, so we're going on holiday. Thank you very much. We've been told we're going to go to paradise. Thank you. No. Mission accomplished. No. They knew that the purpose of religion wasn't necessarily the acquisition of paradise in the hereafter. Yes, of course it is an objective. But the true test of religion in the hereafter is going to be based on different criteria. The true test of religion now, here is the proof lies in the pudding. What does religion turn you into? When I had this extraordinary incident where I was representing, in the early days I used to practice crime. I don't practice crime anymore because, of course, as you know, crime doesn't pay off the criminal, nor the lawyer. But anyway, I represented this guy in a court before a district judge, and he had beaten his wife up after a row. And anyway, I said to him, listen, you ain't going to get anywhere, just plead guilty, please get on with it. Okay, so he pleaded guilty, and there he was in the dock, stood there. And now, I had to plead a mitigation plea before the court. So I said to the judge, I said, I'd like you to look at this man in the dock with a different pair of spectacles. He is a religious man. He is a man of great standing in the community. He is in great service to his community. He is, you know how lawyers go on and on and on and on. And they do. Yes. Okay. And
anyway, in the end, he says, I shall retire for my judgment. And he comes back 10 minutes later and he says, I'm baffled. He looks at the guy and he says, your counsel has mitigated on your behalf, but I am baffled. And I'm thinking, oh no. I thought him well there. He said, I'm baffled. He says, your counsel says that you're a man of standing. You're a religious guy. You've practiced religion all your life. I'm baffled. How can a man of such caliber commit such an atrocity on a poor woman, beating her blue? How can that caliber, I'm baffled, of person do this? It doesn't give you the edge over your neighbor. It doesn't safeguard you going into the wrong camp. Maybe I shouldn't give you the answer. Maybe we should hold another lecture to allow you to actually ponder over this. You go back to our manufacturer, and our manufacturer now tells us that, look, know yourself. Change yourself. Develop. The civil government of the day is not interested in what you do in the four walls of your house. John Locke and other jurisprudentialists, they say, Thomas Hobbes, man in a state of nature is a beast. He comes to civil society, reneges, gives up certain civil liberties in return for which he gets certain privileges. So, for lawyers, man, or legal theorists, man in a state of nature is a beast. But in the Quran and Sunnah, man in a state of nature, لَقَدْ خَلَقْنَا الْإِنسَانَ فِي أَحْسَنِ تَقْوِيمٍ is the best of creation. What does your Creator want from you? Why does He make you put your head on the floor? This act of putting your head on the floor is humiliating. Do you understand the humiliation in this? You put your head on the floor. You know, the thing that distinguishes you from the animal kingdom, you put it on the floor. The utmost act of humiliation that a man could ever, or a woman could ever do. But our Creator says, do it. And not just do it 5 times a day. Again and again. Do it. What does He want from us? Then He says to us, stop eating. What does He want from us? What does He get by starving us? Then He says, once in a lifetime, take your clothes off, put 2 sheets on. You could be a king, you could be a pauper. Get it all off. Put 2 sheets on. Come. Stand. बंदा हो साहिब मुहताज हो गरीब एक हुए तेरी सरकार में पहुंचे तो सभी एक हुए. Come and stand, whoever you are. Stand in 1 row, 2 sheets. I don't care who you are. Stand in 1 row. I don't care what language you speak. Here you speak 1 language, and that language is Labbaik Allahumma Labbaik. That's equality. But what do I benefit from that? The Creator. What does the Creator benefit from that? Nothing. Don't just do it as a ritual. For goodness sake, don't close your eyes. Open your eyes. What does your Creator, manufacturer want from you by making you, by subjecting you to such practices in your life? He is not interested in regulating you for the sake of regulation. He's not interested in complicating your life. He wants you to know yourself and to change yourself and develop yourself into being that perfect human being. Forget the labels. Perfect human being. Perfect human being. Imperfect human being. Imperfect human being. He just says, just become a nice, perfect human being. Is that too much to ask? You miss the wood from the trees. You practice religion so much that you actually forget what the purpose of religion was. It was to change you, to take that anger, that pride, that jealousy, all those attributes that have been implanted in you. Why? لِيَبْلُوَكُمْ أَيُّكُمْ أَحْسَنُ عَمَلًا. So that we could test you. That look, I know we've put all these factors against you, but change yourself. Make yourself the ideal citizen. That is why today you see in India, some of the great Muslims who lived, they are revered not only by Muslims, but even by non-Muslims. I mean, you go to the Sikh community and you ask them, who was Farid? And the Sikh will be able to relate to Baba Farid. Why? Because Baba Farid said, if you don't listen to me, I don't want to know you, or I'm going to shove the truth down your throat whether you like it or not. No. He touched the hearts of millions of Sikhs and continues to do so. Yet he was a Muslim. So what went wrong? Today, we are at odds with each other in the name of religion. Because we've forgotten the real purpose of religion. Recognizing who we are, what our purpose is here, what we're doing here, where we're actually going. Just because your bank balance is better than your neighbor doesn't make you a better person. Just because you've got more degrees on your CV doesn't make you a better person than your neighbor. Just because you've got more titles after you, just because you've got a better job doesn't make you a better person. Ultimately, these people strived not only to preach good, but to practice good. They were emblems of values that we have forgot. We revere them. I mean, everyone reveres Musa and Hussein. But when it comes to implementing those values in our lives, I'm sorry to say, a lot of religious people, in the name of religion, practice the values of pharaohs. They are walking, talking Pharaohs, but they call themselves religion. They are walking, talking Yazids, yet they condemn Yazid. And that's the irony of this whole saga, that we have forgotten the real purpose of religion. That is why scientists and atheists laugh in our face and say, you are, at best, apes who imitate what you've been told. You don't think. My final statement today is, think. Think what this is all about. This wasn't a coincidence. He could have annihilated him with his spiritual power. He could have annihilated him with the power that Allah had given him, but he didn't. He endured. He persevered. What was that perseverance for? For those values. For those values. Today, we don't have to persevere for those values, but we take those values for granted. Go home tonight and look at yourself in the mirror and say to yourself, what part of Yazid is inside me? Go home and say to yourself that the seats of power that I occupy, whether in my domestic, social, or academic, or political life, am I a reflection of the values of Fir'aun? Do I reflect those values? Iblis did not recognize himself. He didn't realize what the object of worship was. He didn't realize what the object of knowledge was. He fell. Pharaoh couldn't see beyond his own self. Yazid couldn't see beyond himself. He didn't know who he was, where he came from, where he was going to go. They put themselves on a pedestal that made them do what they do. These people didn't put themselves on a pedestal. They put themselves on the ground with people, related themselves to people, touched the hearts of people, the minds of people. They changed billions. These changed none. They ruled with fear. They ruled with love. وَمَا عَلَيْنَا إِلَّا الْبَلَاغُ الْمُبِينُ. Any questions? Yes.
Thank you very much for that. This is the first time I've heard you speak very well, and I think your analysis is very interesting, very positive for a university. My question is, I can read about Musa alayhi salam, Quran, scriptures. What is it about Hussein's story that gives it a position on that postcard that invites an entire talk about it? because I can read about this. That knowledge, that information is accessible to me in tafsir and hadith. But in saying not so much. So what is it about him, his story, his fight in this good versus evil that is so important?
You see, Yazid manifested the values of Pharaoh. Same values that I talked about. You know the similarities between them. He manifested those values. And for Hussein, the departure from the prophetic values of leadership disqualified Yazid from being able to sit on that seat of power. This wasn't a case of rebellion. This was a case, he didn't have a personal problem with Yazid. The problem was based around principle. In fact, his problem wasn't even the fact that he succeeded him out of right necessarily. I'm sure he could have tolerated that. The problem wasn't the fact that he, took over power without, consultation and all that. That wasn't fatal. What was fatal was that Yazid was an emblem of the same values. If you looked at his personal character, you would see immorality. You would see, okay, what a person does behind closed doors is his matter with God. No. This wasn't a guy who was doing what he was doing behind closed doors. This is a guy who was coming out and blatantly showing society, listen, I have no regard for the seat that I sit on. The seat is in the name of La ilaha illallah. That invokes a certain responsibility. Yeah. And that responsibility is that I'm here as a representative, Amirul Mu'mineen, I will adhere to a certain benchmark. And if I don't, this isn't like, a political leader in a scandal. Modern day he got caught out, oh well, sorry, I'm going to resign from power. No. This is a case of Yazid openly saying, what are you going to do about it? Yeah, so what if I womanize? What's your problem? What is your problem? So what if I've got 10 girlfriends? What's your problem? So what if I drink? What's your problem? Fine, if Yazid had a drinking problem, he should have said, look, I've got a drinking problem. I'm an alcoholic, I'm going to go here. But no, when you sit on that seat, you must adhere to certain values. And it was the departure from those values that Imam Hussein felt disqualified him from being able to sit there, and therefore didn't pay homage to his leadership. If you look at the Quran and how the Quran describes it, Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu, oh you believe, ati'u Allah wa ati'u Rasul. Be obedient to Allah and be obedient to Rasul. Wa ulil amri minkum, and those who are in charge, in order. Well, Yazid was ulil amr. Why could Imam Hussein say, well, God has commanded me in the Quran that I have to be obedient to you? No. If you look at the grammar and the mantaq and the style of this language, be obedient to God, be obedient to His messenger, and those who are in charge. Not be obedient to them. The prerequisite of your obedience to them is based on their obedience to Allah and His Rasul. If they themselves are disobedient to Allah and His Rasul, they are not worthy of obedience themselves. So their mandate, the mandate of the Ulil Amr, is entrenched in their own obedience to Allah and His Rasul. And frankly, Yazid's whole lifestyle was, I don't care about Allah and His Rasul. And anything that I do care about, my salah, my wala, it's just symbolic. It doesn't mean anything. I'm just doing these rituals just for people. But if you want to know me and what I do, come behind, come to my palace. Here you are, and here's my, wives, concubines, girlfriends, whatever. And here's, this. Here you are. This is me. This is my lifestyle. And Imam Hussein said, listen, you can be what you are in your own home. But when you sit on that seat and then you display this mannerism, then clearly, and immorality is just one example. There are many examples of where he fell short of those prerequisites that are required to sit on that seat. of responsibility and power in being Amir al-Mu'mineen.
I think you need to wake everyone up. It's shy.
Everyone's shy, oh dear. Yeah.
I have another if no one has.
Yes.
So we heard about the story of Zayn in the sense that he stood up against to a Pharaoh-like character, someone who was not fit for that responsibility. So then the natural question in my head next is, why him? Who is he to stand up to this Pharaoh-esque character? Because I know who Musa is to stand up to Pharaoh. I've read about that, I'm told that. But who is Hussein to stand up to
Very
Nine
good
Yashid?
question. Excellent. Sorry, can I top up some water here? Excellent question. Who was Hussein? Why couldn't he just let him live? You see, Hussein isn't just the name of a man. He is a representative of prophetic values. And society knows him to be the vanguard of those values. And his approval of Yazid would strengthen Yazid's mandate and claim of being Amir al-Mu'mineen. If he didn't, which he didn't, that was a serious issue of credibility in Yazid's seat of power. That someone of the caliber of Hussein hasn't given bay'ah. It's not like a vote. Yazid could have taken a vote and he probably would have succeeded, because the way his totalitarian and autocratic regime had implemented itself was that you don't give me a vote, you would have died. So most people, even there were those people who were good people, and they caved in, they gave bay'ah. They said, no, fine, just to save ourselves from this fitna, let's just give in. But you see, for Hussein, it wasn't just about him. It wasn't just about me. I have a problem. No, I am the vanguard of those values. If my hand to him, hand means hand of bay'ah, if I give, in those days it was oath of allegiance. Yes, it was the oath of allegiance. Does that ring a bell? Oath of allegiance? Yes. A lot of people in this room have given oath of allegiance. Yes. You're all Mureeds. And may I say, for those who understand the good old Punjabi language, you're all Ran Mureeds. Because your oath of allegiance is to Her Majesty the Queen. And if you don't believe me, go look at the first page of your passport. I hereby oath of allegiance to her. Anyway, the point is, sorry, where did that come from? That was just a cheat. That was just to take it up. Sorry, what was I saying?
Oath of allegiance.
The oath of allegiance. This is just another tactic to see if you're actually following what you're saying. Right.
At the same time.
Yeah. You see, in those days, the oath of allegiance was a sign of mandate. It was the top people in the top brass in society have given me their oath of allegiance. That justifies my occupation of power. Whereas before, it was based on shura. The first earlier Khalifas came to power as a result of shura. They didn't just wake up one morning and say, right, I'm the leader. But Yazid did exactly that. He felt it was inherent right. Well, that wasn't the issue. The issue was, when he came to power, to justify his mandate, he needed the approval of certain key figures. And Hussein was one of those key figures who was a thorn to his side. And without his bay'ah, Yazid wasn't going to receive that universal appeal that he so badly wanted.
In terms of looking at the whole topic, from an Islamic point of view, how would Islam advise a person of authority to act, what specific characteristics does that person of authority need to hold, and also a layperson within Islam?
You see, it's not that complicated. What Islam says, it doesn't say is that personality has to, behave like this or do that. No. The starting point is, but then be human being. You could wear all the garbs in the world you like. You can do all the ceremonies you like and the shenanigans and the colors and the cults. Are you a good human? That's the starting point. Do you respect human values? And human values doesn't just mean to fellow humans. Today, the West boasts its respect for the rights of animals. But yet, if you look at the corpus of the Quran and Sunnah, cruelty to animals is an offense against the Creator. It's not, oh, well, I killed a dog, so what, the dog? No, it's towards respect, not only towards animals, towards your environment. And the point is, the starting point is, are you a good human being? Has religion, the proof lies in the pudding, has religion turned you into a good human being? Is your neighbor safe from you? Is your anger the subject of regulation? Is your jealousy or is your pride? Are there checks and balances that exist in your life to curtail the harmful effect of that? You see, as far as government is concerned, you could be an absolute pervert sitting in your own home and doing what you like. Society says, don't care, do what you like in your own home. But what they don't realize is that guy who's a pervert in closed doors, tomorrow, given the chance, he will harm his neighbor. He just hadn't had the chance. So why deal with the problem when it's already manifested itself? Look at the root cause of the problem. And that is to know yourself, develop yourself, your relationship with you cannot have a relationship with your Lord if your relationship with your fellow humans are foul. I can give you a number of examples of this. If your relationship with your fellow human beings are foul, your Lord doesn't want to know. You can kiss bye-bye. You can pray on your mat 23 hours of the day, but if you do not uphold your legal obligations towards your neighbor, and when I mean neighbor, I don't mean next door neighbor. The real definition of neighbor is given by Lord Salmon in his famous case in the Stevenson case, where he says, anyone who is within my range is my neighbor. The point is, you don't have to, you don't need cosmetics, you don't need aesthetics. The starting point is, are you a good human being? And then yes, of course, you build on that. And then religion says, okay, now you establish yourself to be a good human being. Now, go to the next level and show compassion and mercy over and above that which you would have given as a human being. But do it for a greater goal. I'm not, look at us these days, and we interact with each other. Typical. Child, how are you, where are you from? Yes. Oh, you live there. Oh, you studied there, very good. Our demeanor towards that person. And if we should meet someone on the, how are you, where do you live? Oh, I live in the council estate over there. Well, our whole demeanor changes. We weigh people. We are kind to people based on our matlab. If I'm kind to you today, I think you could be of some use to me tomorrow. We interact with people based on our mafad or matlab. But real people of religion, they are not kind to people because they have to be kind. They are kind because they know that if I'm kind to you today, your maker will be kind to me tomorrow. I'm not kind because, and I'm guilty of this, by the way. I will drive at below 70 miles an hour as long as I know there's not a camera there. The moment that I know there's a camera, that's it. My behavior will change. Oh, yes, I'm guilty of this. But the point is, why do you require a camera to regulate your conduct? The modern civil government thinks that by bringing in more and more laws, that we will regulate and build order in society. Yes, but what has it produced? It has produced people like me and you who are machines. People who do things out of fear. And that's why depression is such a big problem in this day and age. Fear, grief, anxiety, psychological problems. But if only we went back to basics and said, look, at human level, number one, and number two, if I am going to bring religion into the equation, it's going to put me on a higher pedestal of humility, higher pedestal of kindness, higher pedestal of attachment to justice and the rules of justice, higher attachment to the rule of law, not because there's cameras there or because there's police around the corner, but because I have a higher duty. And that duty isn't based on obligation or fear. Yeah, for some people, their whole psycho-status dictates that they need fear to regulate them. And Allah says, وَلِمَنْ خَافَ مَقَامَ رَبِّهِ جَنَّتَانِ. Yeah, fine, fear. But the ultimate force that will make you, that will take you onto that higher ground is your love for your manufacturer. That love is what makes you who you are. And that's why when the companion was asked by the Prophet ﷺ, what will you take to God in the hereafter? He didn't say, I will take my prayer or my knowledge. He said, I will take my love for you and Allah. Because it's that love that colors my life. Today we've lost the concept of love. For us, love and the model of love is that which Hollywood, Bollywood, or Lollywood, or whichever one you subscribe to, has given. And the beautiful thing with that love is you don't know when it comes and when it goes. I mean, I had a client, she came up to me and she said, I want a divorce. I said, really? Why? I'm not in love with him anymore. Said, oh, fascinating. Was it an arranged marriage? No. Did your father force you? No. So, what led to? I fell in love with him. Well, I thought I did. And now, I'm not in love with him. Oh, really? And what will happen after this? Oh, I'm in love with my neighbour. Love is like a switch. On, off. You know, I often claim, if I fall in love with someone, you don't even need to meet them. Photograph 2 Indian songs and you're in love. Honestly, it's that easy. Your mind plays games with you. You know. We don't understand. Real love is that your whole life is colored. You know, look, I gave you the example of an animal. There was a person by the name of Abdul Ghaffar. We know him as Nuh alayhi salam, or Noah. He was walking on the street, Noah, the great prophet. Walking on the street, he saw a dog. The dog had leprosy. And, you know, leprosy is contagious. So he looked at the dog and said, check. Great. Get out of me. They moved on. That dog asked God for a tongue to speak to Noah, Abdul Ghaffar. And he said, oh God, let me just speak to him. So God gave him the tongue. That dog spoke to Abdul Ghaffar. He said, Abdul Ghaffar, you hate me because of my leprosy? You shun me because of my leprosy? You despise me because of my leprosy? But do you know who gave me this leprosy? Did I choose to be in this state? My manufacturer, my creator gave this to me. By hating me, you hated my creator. When Abdul Ghaffar heard this, he began to cry. He cried and he cried and he cried. And his name became Naha Yanuhu Nohan, the crier. Yeah. You know, our whole treatment, because he loved God so much. He loved God so much. So for him, you know, what that dog said revolutionized his life. Today, you know, if we know that someone's connected to a gang, we don't touch them because we know that gang will come back and and yet we have the audacity to harm our fellow neighbor, thinking, who's going to stand up for you? Don't you know that that human who you oppress has a Lord, has a Creator? If he doesn't have the power, or she doesn't have the power to come back to you, he certainly does. And he will come back to you. Yeah. لِكُلِّ فِرْعَوْنٍ مُوسَى. For every Pharaoh, there is a Moses. The question you have to ask yourself is, are you going to be an emblem of Fir'aun, or are you going to be an emblem of Musa?
Any questions from the sisters side?
Right, well, can I thank you at the conclusion of this? As I speak, I try to scan your faces to see if you're actually listening or whether you're just saying, yeah, whatever. But I must congratulate you that you have demonstrated an interest in the question.